Back in 2007, I was doing a local show here in Portland on KPOJ, in addition to doing this national show that you're listening to right now. And the local guys for the local station, KPOJ was the station here in Portland at the time, the local sales guys for the station kept bringing me ads. This was toward the middle of 2007. They kept bringing me ads for these, you know, for basically Steve Mnuchin's kind of company, you know, these companies that, subprime mortgage lenders. You know, interest rates are only 2% now. You want to buy a house and you don't have to qualify, and they don't, you know, they're not even going to ask you about your credit history and all this kind of stuff. And somewhere in the mid or the end of 2007, I basically told the salespeople, I will not read these ads anymore because I think that a crash is coming, and I'm warning people of this every day on the radio. And sure enough, and by the way, I was pretty sure that George W. Bush knew that, and Dick Cheney knew that as well, and Henry Paulson and Alan Greenspan, the Fed chairman, that they all knew that a crash was coming, and they were doing everything they could to hold it off until after the election. That way, if the crash happened the day after the election, you know, just pull the props out, right? And boom, down it goes the day after the election. And if a Democrat gets elected, then they can, the message for the Republican Party is, see, the American people realize that when a Democrat's elected, it's going to destroy the economy. And so they all ran away from the stock market or whatever. And on the other hand, if John McCain got elected, hey, he's not George Bush, right? So Bush gets to ride off into the sunset. I think that Donald Trump is doing the same thing right now. I really do. And in fact, on June 15th, a couple of days ago, he tweeted, if anyone but me takes over, there will be a market crash the likes of which has not been seen before. He is fully anticipating this. And by the way, when Bush was trying to forestall a crash between 2001 and 2003, he passed through Congress and signed 3 giant tax cuts. In aggregate, those 3 tax cuts were larger than the one Trump just signed. And this was just in the first 3 years, first 3 years of the Bush administration. Giant tax cut. Bill Clinton had left him a $236 billion budget surplus. His State of the Union address said, that's your money. We're going to spend that surplus. And by 2008, we had an annual deficit of $458 billion. In addition, Bush and Cheney got us into 2 wars. Defense spending had never exceeded $290 billion throughout the 1990s, through George Herbert Walker Bush and Bill Clinton's administrations. When Bush left office, it was $595 billion in 2008. Literally poured trillions into the defense industry to goose the economy. And then you had Alan Greenspan, the old Ayn Rand cult member. When Bush came into office, interest rates were at 6.5% in 2000. He dropped this down to 2% in 2002 and kept it right around 2% right up to the election of 2004, which made George W. Bush, you know, gave him a feel-good economy. He got reelected over John Kerry, and so he reappointed Alan Greenspan. And I think that we're seeing the same thing right now with Trump, Steve Mnuchin, and Jerome Powell. They're doing the exact same process. And they're trying to hold this thing off until after the election. And if they can hold it off until after the election, and if a Democrat does get elected, there's going to be some serious challenges to the Democratic messaging on this. Although maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. And I'd love to get your opinion on this. But I think that the Democratic Party needs to get ready. And they need to have a contingency plans for what happens if the crash happens before the election, and what happens if the crash happens immediately after the election. What happens if there's a Democrat in the White House immediately after the election? What happens if Trump gets reelected? How do we message this?